Marcus stood in the eastern corridor of the Grand Palace, his gray uniform fitting perfectly across his broad shoulders. The walls around him gleamed with a soft blue light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. He had been working as a guard in the palace for 3 months now, ever since the peace treaty between humanity and the Steel Empire had been signed. And he still felt like an outsider in this place. The Zethal were tall, elegant beings with skin that shifted between silver and pale green, depending on how the light touched them. Their eyes were large and dark, holding intelligence that made Marcus feel small sometimes. They had built cities that reached into the clouds and technology that made human engineering look primitive. When they had first agreed to let humans work in their palace, many had doubted it would work. But Marcus had proven himself to be reliable and quiet, the kind of guard who did his job without complaining. His job was simple most of the time. He stood in hallways. He walked patrol routes. He made sure that nobody who should not be there got through the doors that he protected. He rarely spoke to anyone unless he absolutely had to. The other guards, all still, did not speak much to him either. They seemed to view humans as something less than they were, good for protection, but not for friendship. Marcus did not mind much. He preferred to watch and listen rather than talk. It was during these long, quiet hours of patrol that he began to notice things. He saw the way certain council members would nod to each other in hallways. He noticed that meetings had started happening behind locked doors in the observation tower on the far side of the palace. He observed that Queen Zelina, the ruler of the entire empire, seemed increasingly alone, even though she was constantly surrounded by advisors and servants. Queen Zelina was striking even by Steel standards. Her skin had a luminous quality, more vivid green and silver than others of her kind. She moved with the kind of confidence that only someone born to power could possess. But in the past few weeks, Marcus had noticed something different. She stood taller now, as if holding herself up was an effort. Her eyes, when she looked at her council members, held a question that nobody was answering. One evening, during the changing of the guard shift, Marcus was assigned to a new route. This was unusual. Most guards stayed in their assigned areas for months. But the captain of the guard had simply told him to report to the Eastern Tower observation deck for the next week. Marcus did not ask why. He simply nodded and accepted his new position. The observation deck was in the highest part of the palace, and from it, you could see across the entire capital city. The sun was setting in shades of red and orange that Marcus found beautiful. He walked the empty corridors, his footsteps making soft sounds against the polished floor. There was nobody else here. The palace was so large that entire sections could sit empty for hours while activity happened in other parts. Marcus was about to turn down another hallway when he heard voices. They came from behind a partially open door marked with symbols he could not read. He did not mean to stop and listen. His training told him he should continue on and ignore what did not concern him. But something made him pause. Something in the tone of the voices suggested importance. He moved closer to the door, careful to keep his footsteps silent. Through the gap, he could see 3 figures. 2 were Thel Council members he recognized from ceremonies and official events. The third was Commander Huron, the highest-ranking military officer in the Empire. Huron was larger than most Dazdal, with darker skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The timeline must be accelerated, Huron was saying. His voice was quiet but held absolute authority. The reports from the outer colonies continue to paint the Queen as weak. If we move soon, the people will support us. They are already questioning her ability to lead. The other council member, a female named Serena, spoke next. But the evidence of her failures must be stronger. We need something undeniable. We will create what we need, Huron replied. The Queen has called for a major address in 4 weeks. During that ceremony, she will announce new trade agreements with the outer colonies. The people expect prosperity, Instead, we will ensure that the announcement brings only news of increased conflict and loss. By then, we will have the military support to act. She will be arrested before she can speak." Marcus felt his heart beating faster. He understood enough to know that this was wrong. These people were planning to remove the Queen from power, to take control themselves by using false information and military force. They were planning to destroy her. He backed away from the door, moving as silently as he could. His mind was racing with questions and fears. What should he do? Who could he tell? In the human military, he would have reported this to his commanding officer immediately. But here, he was just a human. The Zdel did not trust humans with important matters. They saw humans as soldiers, not as people capable of understanding complex political problems. Marcus returned to his patrol, his thoughts in chaos. He walked the corridors, watching the palace lights slowly dim as night fell. He thought about the Queen, about how alone she seemed, about how she deserved to know what was being planned against her. But he also thought about what would happen to him if he spoke out. They would call him a liar. They would say he was trying to cause trouble, that he had misunderstood what he heard, that a human had no business knowing about such important matters. By the time his shift ended, Marcus still had no answers. He changed out of his uniform and walked back to the human quarters, a small section of the palace where the dozen human employees lived. His room was simple. A bed, a table, a window that looked out onto the gardens. He sat on his bed and stared at the wall for hours, his mind turning over and over the same impossible choice. The Queen was in danger, and he was the only one who knew about it. But nobody would believe him. Nobody would listen to what a human had to say about matters of empire and power. The next 3 days passed like a dream for Marcus. He went through his patrol routines. He performed his duties with the same quiet efficiency he always showed, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He kept thinking about what he had heard in the observation tower. He kept thinking about the Queen walking into a trap of her own people's making. On the 4th day, something changed. Marcus was called to the captain's office early in the morning. Captain Vex was a tall still with pale skin and eyes that seemed to see everything. He looked at Marcus for a long moment before speaking. "You have been observing things," Vex said. It was not a question. Marcus's entire body went cold. Had someone seen him listening at the door? Had his presence been detected? He tried to keep his face neutral, the way he had been trained. "I observe my surroundings," Marcus replied carefully. "It is part of my job." Vex tilted his head slightly. "You notice patterns. You understand when things do not fit together properly. These are good qualities in a guard. For this reason, I am assigning you to night patrol in the restricted areas of the palace. Most guards find this work boring. There is nothing to see, nothing to do. But I suspect you will find it interesting. You will begin tonight." Marcus wanted to ask why, but he said nothing. He simply nodded and left the office. His mind was racing. Was this a coincidence? Or did the captain know something? The restricted areas of the palace were where the council met, where the important decisions were made. If he was being sent there, if he was being given the chance to patrol those corridors at night when fewer people were around, then maybe, just maybe, the captain wanted him to know something. At night, Marcus put on his uniform and began his new route. The restricted corridors were like a different palace entirely. During the day, they were busy with officials and servants. At night, they were empty and silent, with only the soft hum of the building systems to keep him company. He walked slowly, taking his time, letting himself really see everything. The observation tower was the same as during the day, but it felt different in darkness. The city lights below created patterns on the floor. Marcus walked past the door where he had heard the conversation before. It was locked now, but he could see that there were devices attached to the frame, things that recorded who entered and left. He made a note of this dot over the next week. Marcus's night patrols revealed more information. He found a room where documents were stored, all locked behind transparent barriers. He could not read the Zell writing clearly, but he could see charts and lists and names. One name appeared repeatedly in his observations: Queen Zelina. Another appeared just as often: Commander Huron. On the 8th night of his new assignment, Marcus found something crucial. A meeting room had a small window, and the blind inside had been left partially open. Through it, he could see a table with documents scattered across its surface. He could also see a calendar, and on one of the dates, someone had written in bold letters, "Day of Declaration. Operation begins." The date was the same as when the Queen had scheduled her major address to the Empire. Marcus knew he could not simply stand there, looking in windows forever. Eventually, someone would see him. Eventually, someone would ask questions. He had learned all he needed to know. The conspiracy was real. It was being planned carefully. It would happen in less than 4 weeks. And the Queen had no idea. That night, when his shift ended, Marcus did something he had never done before. He requested a private meeting with the head of palace security. This was highly unusual. Humans did not request meetings with important officials. Humans followed orders and did their jobs and did not make themselves noticed. But Marcus knew he was out of time. He could not just wait and hope something changed. The security chief, a female named Cassira, was surprised to see him. She looked at Marcus as if he were something strange, something that had appeared in her office by accident. "What is it?" she asked. "Is there a problem with your assignment?" "No problem," Marcus said, carefully. "I wanted to report something I observed during my patrols." Cassira leaned back in her chair. "You observed something? What could a human observe that we have not already noticed ourselves?" Marcus felt his courage faltering, but he pushed ahead. "I believe there is a conspiracy within the council. I believe Commander Huron and others are planning to remove the Queen from power using false information and military force. The operation is planned for the day of her major address to the Empire." The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours, though it was probably only a few seconds. Cassira stared at Marcus without moving, without changing her expression at all. Then she stood up and walked to the door of her office. She opened it and gestured for Marcus to leave. "You should not speak of such things," she said coldly. "You do not have the understanding to know what you are talking about. You are human. You see things from your simple perspective and draw conclusions that are not correct. Conspiracy against the Queen? This is impossible. The Council serves the throne. Return to your duties and speak of this to no one." Marcus left her office with his heart sinking. He had been right to fear that nobody would believe him, but he had made a mistake in going to Cassira. Now she knew that he had overheard something. Now she might tell others. Now he might have just made everything worse. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange state of waiting. Marcus continued his night patrols, but nothing seemed to change. The meetings in the observation tower continued. Huron and the council members still met behind locked doors. The calendar date continued to get closer. Marcus began to wonder if there was anything else he could do. He had tried to go through the proper channels, and it had failed. He could not go to the human authorities, because humans had no authority in the Still Empire. He could not tell his fellow guards, because they were all still, and they would never believe a human over one of their own kind. But he could try one more time. He could try to warn the Queen directly. It was dangerous. It was probably impossible. But it was the only option he had left, and with each passing day, he knew he was running out of time. Marcus spent 2 days preparing what he would say. He wrote nothing down because writing things down was dangerous. Instead, He walked and thought, memorized details, and practiced the words in his mind. He needed to be clear but brief. He needed to give enough information to make the queen believe him without revealing how he had learned what he knew. And he needed to do all of this while getting close to someone who was constantly surrounded by guards and advisors. The opportunity came on a morning when the queen was touring the lower gardens. This was part of her regular schedule, something that happened the same way each week. The gardens were beautiful, with plants from across the Zell Empire growing in carefully designed spaces. The queen walked slowly through them, sometimes stopping to look at a particular flower, sometimes speaking quietly with her attendants. Marcus had arranged to be assigned to garden duty that morning. It had required him to trade shifts with another guard, which he had done quietly, without drawing attention. Now he stood near the entrance to the garden, watching as the queen approached. As she passed by him, Marcus did something that went against all his training. He stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "I must speak with you about something important." The queen's attendants immediately moved forward to stop him, but the queen raised her hand. She looked at Marcus with surprise and something else, something that might have been curiosity. "A human guard," she said. Her voice was soft and musical. "And you wish to speak to me?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus replied. "But not here. Not in front of others." The queen tilted her head. "You are very bold for someone of your kind. Or perhaps very foolish. Come with me." She turned and walked toward a more private part of the gardens, a section surrounded by tall plants where nobody else could easily hear them. Her attendants remained behind, looking uncertain. The queen did not seem to care what they thought. When they were alone, the queen stopped and turned to face Marcus fully. This close, he could see that her eyes were more complex than he had realized, with colors that shifted as she watched him. She was taller than he was by perhaps a head, and she stood in a way that reminded him that she was the most powerful person in the entire empire. "Speak quickly," she said, "and choose your words carefully. If you are wasting my time, there will be consequences." Marcus took a deep breath. "Your Majesty, there is a conspiracy against you. Members of your council, led by Commander Huron, are planning to have you arrested during your address to the Empire in 3 weeks. They are creating false reports of military failures and loss of life in the outer colonies. They will use these false reports to convince the people that you are weak and unable to lead. When you make your announcement, they will move against you. They have military support. They have other council members. They are ready to take the throne." The queen's expression did not change. She simply looked at Marcus for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. "How do you know this?" she asked finally. Marcus had known this question was coming. "I heard them speaking in the observation tower," he said. "I was on patrol, and I heard them discussing the plan." "You were eavesdropping," the queen said. "Yes, Your Majesty. And why should I believe the word of a human guard against the word of my own council members? Why should I believe that members of my own government would betray me?" Marcus understood why she was doubting him. "Because you already knew something was wrong," he said. "You already felt it. You know that the council has been acting strangely. You know that meetings are happening that you are not invited to. You know that people are talking in whispers and stopping when you enter rooms. I am just confirming what you already suspected." The queen was silent for a long time. She looked away from Marcus, looking instead at the plants around them. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quieter. "You are correct," she said. "I have felt the change. I thought perhaps I was imagining it. I thought perhaps it was the burden of leadership making me suspicious of everyone. But I felt it, yes. In the gathering of council members. In the way Huron has been building alliances. In conversations that end too quickly when I approach." She looked back at Marcus. Why would you risk everything to warn me? You are a human. You are barely part of this empire. Why would you care what happens to the queen? Marcus had not expected this question, but he answered honestly. Because it is right, he said. Because somebody needed to tell you, and I was the only one who knew. Because I could not just watch something terrible happen and do nothing. The queen nodded slowly. What is your name, human? Marcus, your majesty. Very well, Marcus. Here is what will happen. You will say nothing to anyone about this conversation. You will continue your normal duties. You will not draw attention to yourself. I will investigate quietly, carefully. If what you tell me is true, I will handle this. If it is not true, I will deal with you accordingly. Do you understand? Yes, your majesty. Then go, the queen said, turning away to look at the plants again. And Marcus, if this is some kind of trick or trap, remember that I can make your death very slow and very painful. Marcus bowed deeply and left her standing in the garden. As he walked back toward the palace, his legs felt like they were made of water. He had done it. He had warned the queen. But now came the hardest part of all. Now he had to wait and see what would happen next. The next 10 days were the longest of Marcus's life. He continued his patrols as if nothing had changed. He ate his meals. He slept in his small room. He performed every task that was assigned to him. But underneath everything, there was a constant tension, a feeling that something large and dangerous was moving beneath the surface. The palace itself seemed to change. The tone of meetings became more urgent. Guards were reassigned to new positions. The queen appeared in public less often, and when she did, she seemed calm but watchful. Marcus could not tell if she had acted on his warning or if she was still investigating. Then, on the 11th day, something happened that made everything accelerate. Marcus was assigned to door guard duty for the council chamber. This was an unusual assignment for him, and it put him in a position where he could see everyone who entered and left important meetings. That afternoon, an emergency council meeting was called. All the members came rushing in, their movements sharp and agitated. Commander Huron arrived last, his dark skin seeming to absorb the light as he passed. The meeting lasted for 2 hours. When the council members finally emerged, they looked angry and confused. Huron's face was twisted into an expression of pure rage. He did not speak to anyone as he left. But Marcus heard him mutter one phrase that turned his blood cold. Someone warned her. There is a traitor. That evening, as Marcus was changing shifts, he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Huron standing before him, his large frame blocking out the light. I wish to speak with you, Huron said. Marcus had no choice but to follow. They went to a private room away from the other guards. Huron closed the door and looked at Marcus with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. You have been assigned to unusual duties recently, Huron said. Night patrols in restricted areas. Garden duty, now door guard work. Tell me, human, do you notice everything that happens in this palace? Marcus kept his voice steady. I notice what I need to notice to do my job, Commander. Do you? Huron stepped closer. I wonder if you notice more than you should. I wonder if your human ears have picked up conversations that were not meant for them. Huron's hand shot out and grabbed Marcus by the throat, lifting him slightly off the ground. Did you warn the queen? Marcus could not speak. His airway was blocked. Black spots appeared at the edges of his vision. He tried to shake his head, but Huron's grip was too strong. I do not believe you, Huron said. He threw Marcus against the wall. Marcus hit hard and fell to the ground, gasping for breath. If I find that you are the traitor, I will remove you piece by piece. Do you understand me? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Good. Now leave. Continue your duties. and say nothing of this to anyone. Marcus left the room on shaking legs. His neck hurt where Huron had grabbed him. He knew that he was now on the list of suspects. He knew that Huron would be watching him. And he knew that if Huron found evidence that he was the one who had warned the Queen, death would be preferable to what would happen to him. Over the next 3 days, things became even more tense. The conspiracy was accelerating, and Marcus could see it happening all around him. Guards who he knew to be loyal to Huron were being positioned in key locations. Weapons were being moved. Plans were being finalized. The Queen was doing something too, though what exactly, Marcus could not tell. Her security chief, Kassira, was organizing patrols in unusual ways. There seemed to be more guards in certain locations and fewer in others. And at one point, Marcus noticed that 3 of the council members who had been part of the conspiracy were no longer coming to the palace. On day 4 after Huron's confrontation with him, Marcus was approached by another human guard. This was Kevin, one of the few other human soldiers in the palace. Kevin usually kept to himself, just like Marcus did. But now he was watching Marcus with suspicion. "Why are you getting special assignments?" Kevin asked. "Why are you being moved around so much? Are you spying for the Jutho? Are you trying to get a promotion or something?" Marcus did not know what to say. He could not tell Kevin the truth. But Kevin's suspicion made him realize that others were noticing his unusual movements through the palace. That made him a target in multiple ways. The night before the Queen's scheduled address, Marcus did not sleep. He sat in his room and waited for morning. He did not know if the Queen had found enough evidence of the conspiracy. He did not know if she had enough support to survive what was coming. He did not know if his own presence in the palace would help her or doom her. All he knew was that tomorrow, everything would be decided. Tomorrow, either the conspiracy would fail or the Queen would fall. And somehow, despite his better judgment and his human desire for safety, Marcus had become central to which outcome would come to pass. The morning arrived gray and cool. Marcus put on his uniform and went to find out if his warning had been enough to save the Queen, or if all his effort had been for nothing. The great hall where the Queen would address the Empire was filled with thousands of people. The seats rose in perfect circles, tier after tier, creating an amphitheater that could hold more beings than Marcus could count. Below, in the central space, was the Queen's platform. Around it, guards stood in formation. Marcus had been assigned to the security detail for the event, a position that surprised him but that he did not question. The crowd was a mixture of stale and other species from across the Empire. There were diplomats from colony worlds, military officers, council members, and ordinary citizens who had won the chance to attend through a lottery system. Everyone had come to hear what the Queen would announce. Rumors suggested changes to trade policy, new agreements with distant worlds, or announcements about future exploration. Nobody knew what was really about to happen. The Queen entered to the sounds of ceremonial music. She moved across the platform with perfect confidence, her skin glowing with that luminous quality that made her beautiful and powerful. She looked out across the sea of faces, and then she began to speak. But she did not announce trade agreements or new policies. Instead, she spoke about loyalty and betrayal. She spoke about the dangers of corruption within government. She spoke about people who had tried to deceive her, to use false information to move the Empire in directions that would benefit themselves rather than the people. As she spoke, the massive screens around the Great Hall came to life. They showed recordings, security footage of council members meeting secretly, audio recordings of their conversations about how to remove the Queen, documents that detailed their plans to arrest her and take control. And at the center of all of it, the face of Commander Huron, giving orders, making plans, coordinating the takeover of the Empire. The hall erupted into chaos. Some people gasped. Some stood up from their seats. The council members who had been part of the conspiracy looked stunned, as if they could not believe they had been discovered. Then the Queen's voice cut through the noise. "Bring them forward," she commanded. Security forces moved through the crowd, surrounding the conspirators. Commander Huron stood as if to run, but guards appeared from every direction, blocking his escape. The other council members did not resist. They seemed to realize that they had lost thought as the conspirators were being removed from the hall. The Queen's eye swept across the crowd, and they found Marcus. She looked at him for just a moment, and in that moment, Marcus understood that she was about to reveal his involvement. "There is one more thing I must tell you," the Queen said, her voice filling the entire hall. This conspiracy would have succeeded if not for the actions of someone who was willing to risk everything for what was right. Someone who had no obligation to care about the Empire or about me, but who could not ignore the truth they had discovered. I speak of Marcus, a human guard, who learned of the conspiracy and came to warn me despite knowing that nobody would believe him. Despite knowing the danger it would place him in. All eyes turned toward Marcus. He felt every gaze in the hall burning into him. He wanted to disappear, to become invisible, but he could not. The Queen gestured for him to come forward. Marcus walked down to the platform, moving through the suddenly silent crowd. When he reached the Queen, he bowed deeply, as was proper. "Stand," the Queen said. "Stand and let them see you. Let them know that this victory came not from stealth strength, but from human character." Marcus stood. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him. Some looked with gratitude. Some looked with anger or shame that they had doubted the Queen. But most looked with something new, something that had not been directed at humans before: respect. The Queen placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "From this day forward, humans are honored in our empire. We were wrong to see you as lesser beings, as useful only for physical labor and protection. We were wrong to doubt your capacity for loyalty and wisdom. Marcus has shown us what it means to have true strength of character. He will serve as my advisor, not as my guard. And I hope that this is the beginning of a new era in the Steel Empire, an era where we value those around us, regardless of their origin or their kind." Over the following weeks, things changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. The conspirators were tried and imprisoned. 3 of the council members admitted to being part of the plot. Commander Huron fought the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was sentenced to life in confinement, stripped of his rank and titles, and Marcus became something nobody had expected a human to become. He was given an office in the palace. He was invited to attend council meetings. The Queen asked his opinion on matters of importance. Others, seeing how the Queen treated him, began to adjust their own behavior toward humans. New policies were developed to ensure that humans in the Empire were treated with respect and given opportunities for advancement. Kevin, the other human guard who had been suspicious of Marcus, ended up being reassigned to better duties. When he understood what Marcus had done and why he had been acting so strangely, he apologized. The 2 humans became friends, and together they helped create new pathways for humans to contribute more meaningfully to the Empire. 6 months after the Grand Hall address, the Queen held a ceremony. She presented Marcus with medals and honors, speaking about his courage and his integrity. He stood in the same great hall where everything had changed, surrounded by thousands of steel and other beings from across the Empire. And he realized that his life had transformed completely. He had come to the Zeal Palace as a guard, someone doing a job for payment and security. He left as something far greater. He was proof that character mattered more than species. He was proof that one person's choice to do what was right could change the fate of an entire empire. And in a way that he had never expected, a human had become one of the most important people in the Stale government. The Queen stood beside him as the crowd applauded. And Marcus understood that this was just the beginning of something new, something that would benefit humanity and their still empire in ways that nobody could yet imagine.